Join me as we embark on Black Culture Trek 2024, celebrating the profound influence of African American and Black culture in Paris, Brussels, and London from September 21st through 27th, 2024. Immerse yourself in rich history, savor exquisite cuisine, and explore hidden gems guided by local experts. This transformative journey promises a unique blend of culture, heritage, and self-discovery, offering an unparalleled opportunity to make history together. Don't miss out. Go to www.yourbestlifeabroad.com/Black Culture Trek registration to register now for an unforgettable experience. Now, on to the podcast. Okay, so hello, I am Dr. Raquel, and thank you so much for joining us today on Best Life Abroad, Not Your Average Travel Podcast. So today we will be speaking with Tanja, who relocated to Barbados, and she's going to share some of her thoughts and insights and tell us about her journey to moving abroad. So Tanja, thank you so much, and welcome to the Best Life Abroad podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So let's jump right in. I know that you have lived abroad for 15 years.
Yes.
And so can you talk to us, like at some point you were like, okay, I think I want to move abroad. So can you tell us how it went from kind of an idea of moving abroad to I can actually make this a reality and I'm going to do this thing?
Okay, so I'm actually from Barbados, originally from Barbados. So I was born and raised here, but there was a part of me that knew from the time I was a child I was going to leave. I always knew that. So I'd also chosen accountancy as my profession when I was 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
So I always had the intention that I was going to work as an accountant outside of Barbados. So pretty much from the time I was late in my teenage years, all through university, it was something that was just sitting in the back of my head, because it was something that while I wasn't necessarily thinking about it every day, it was something that I knew that was just going to be part of my life. So having known that at an early age, I would have made certain decisions. And I always say that I think that one of the decisions that I've made at an early age, which coincide with my career, has allowed me to live the life that I wanted to live. And that was by managing my finances.
Okay.
So I have always managed my finances from the time I was a child.
Okay.
I didn't know it was managing my finances back then. I just knew that I was a heavy saver. You gave me $5 as a child. I was a child who would keep that for 10 years. I was not a child who to go there and spend my money on whatever looked pretty. So pretty much after I left university, I worked in Barbados for a couple of years. But, the idea of working abroad was still part of my, my long-term goals. At one time, I had thought that I would have initially left Barbados to go do a master's somewhere. And I had tried to pursue that, but that didn't work out. And I think that it was a blessing in disguise, because like 2 years later, I actually got offered a role in the Channel Islands. And for persons who don't know where the Channel Islands are, there's these very small little islands between France and the UK. And I was offered a job there. And this would have been like I think I was probably like 26 years or 27 at the time. So that was my first expat experience. No, that was not my first experience living outside of Barbados, because I had left Barbados maybe 2 years prior to that, to go to Trinidad to be a full-time student, to be a qualified accountant. So I'd spent 3 months there, and I'd come back to Barbados, and now 2 years later, I was offered this role in Guernsey. So I spent 2 years in Guernsey, and I came back to Barbados. I spent 1 year in Barbados working. And then at that point, I had kind of achieved what I had written as my career goal when I left university. And that was to be the chief financial person in an organization. So at that point, sitting in the chair as a financial controller, I looked around and I said to myself, okay, so what do we do now? I was less than 30 years old. And I was like, yeah, this feels great, but do I just want to sit here and consume this stress for the rest of my life? And after that, conversation with myself, one of the things I said, if I were to die tomorrow, what would I regret? And what I regret was traveling the world.
Wow.
So a year after being back in Barbados, I packed up everything, took a career break, and I spent a year on a career break, but I spent 8 months of that year traveling. So I think I can't really remember if it was like 8 or 9 countries in between that space of time.
Wow.
Spent about 4 months in Asia. And I did, my travel sabbatical at that point in time. And I came back to Barbados, started working. The job that I was doing then took me to St. Lucia. So I was spending quite a bit of time working in St. Lucia. And then I went to Antigua, and then I moved to Bermuda. And I spent pretty much close to 6 years in Bermuda then as an expat as well. So yes. So I've done about 5 countries as an expat, and then there's an additional country that I've done as well, living. And in between there, I've continued to travel. I do a lot of solo travel. I've been to over 40 countries now across the world as a solo traveler. So travel has just always been me and a part of who I was and who I believe who I will always continue to be.
So you have a wealth of experience kind of being outside of your comfort zone, basically. And so can you talk to us about kind of what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced as you approach entering these new spaces?
And the thing is, when people talk about outside of your comfort zone, traveling, I don't feel travel is part of my outside of my comfort zone. If you ask me to get up and do public speaking and that type of thing, then I'm kind of outside of my comfort zone. But if you ask me to pack a suitcase and travel around the world, I don't feel like I'm outside of my comfort zone. I always say that when I moved to Guernsey, as a young accountant, the idea of being on my own, I was already on my own. I was already living on my own for about 6 years. No, not 6 years. For maybe 5 years. Before I actually made that move to live internationally and as an expat. So I already knew what it was like to have my own challenges as an individual and as a single person and having no one to rely on but yourself. And that's one of the biggest challenges that a lot of expat people face. Sometimes they come from their own communities, whether they're from a close-knit family or just in their neighborhood or whatever. And then they move to this place that they've never been before, and they don't have that support system. And I know that that's one of the biggest challenges that people face. For me, I already knew what that felt like. I already knew what it was like to be out there on my own. So I knew okay, it's me. I can ask for help. This is how I would go about asking for help. You may not get it. You may get it. But you're going to be okay. And, I am okay with the fact that not everything is going to work out, but eventually it will happen. And I'm okay with that. The biggest challenge I would say that I had was the weather. The Channel Islands, their summer is 21 degrees, and it doesn't always happen. So coming from a climate, of 30-something degrees every day, to get up just one, I left Barbados one day, it was 30-something degrees. I got up the next morning and it was fog, and I have to go to work in this fog. And that for me was the biggest challenge. How do I do this every day, knowing that the winter may not just be the winter. Your summer isn't really a summer. What do we look forward to in terms of weather? So that was one of my biggest challenges. I know one of the other challenges that a lot of people also face is the loneliness sometimes as an expat. Again, because you are in a foreign land and, even though you may have co-workers who may be welcoming to you and you have a good work experience, and not everybody gets a good work experience initially. But even if you have a good work experience, those individuals are going home to their families. And whereas on your own, you are on your own. Again, I'm introverted. So I kind of squash that one. And the other things that would normally pop up, I don't necessarily see them as challenges or outside of my comfort zone. I see them as more like adventure. I know sometimes food is one of those other things where people struggle with. I am one of those individuals who I can cook my local food. So I am able to find whatever ingredients I need to wherever I am in the world. And if I want to have a local meal or more Caribbean meal, I can do that for myself. But at the same time, I am open because of my travel history. I am open to trying new foods and trying new experiences. And you know, there are a lot of little day-to-day things, you know, and if you're from the other side of, you know, the Western Caribbean, US side, you know, sometimes it's basic things is like how the stove works. It doesn't work the same in Europe. You know, I remember going, and this is a story that I share with a few persons here and there. And I remember the first day that I'd moved into my place, after having moved to the UK and I was going to work, I couldn't get my door locked. I just could not figure out how to get the door locked. And eventually I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to leave it unlocked. And I went to work. And, you know, I went to work and I said to a coworker, like, I don't understand how you lock this door. And, you know, like, I am not the kind of person who gets easily embarrassed. And I say to persons, you know, like sometimes when people say to, you know, I may have done something silly and they say, oh, are you not embarrassed? Or, you know, where's your shame? And I said, I left shame around the world a long time ago. If you're a traveler and you've lived outside of your country or you've done heavy traveling, you know that you have to get over this whole thing of being embarrassed and being whatever. Yes. It goes out through the window really, really quickly. So like for those things, you know, they're little minor things. And if you're the type of person who you've never had that experience of being on your own and having to figure it out, you're going to struggle. And there are things that I've had to figure out regardless. And it doesn't even matter, even if you're a seasoned traveler, because each country that you relocate to is still going to be different in some regards. And there's something that you're going to have to figure out.
Yeah, I love so much of what you're sharing, because I think it really speaks to the characteristics that are necessary to move abroad. One is what you mentioned about fear. You have to be willing to say, it may be something that's scary, but I'm going to push through. You also have to have the mindset of,
I'm going to survive this.
I will survive this. No matter what is happening, no matter how I feel today, I will hopefully not feel this way always. And if I do, I can find another place to go. So definitely that I will survive this. And then even that last part about shame. I just remember like so many things where I'm like, I don't know this. I remember my first time living abroad. I lived in Spain. I could not figure out how to weigh a vegetable in that grocery store for months. I did not know. I lived off of, and it sounds gross, but I used to eat penne pasta mixed together with a can of tuna fish. And they had like a bag of vegetables together.
That was already
mix that up. Put some salad, some like Italian salad dressing. I ate that every day because I was like, I can't figure it out. But it's true. It's like, you know, you just have to accept that you're not going to know everything. You ask, you might get it.
You ask, you have to be bold enough. You have to be bold enough to know that you are going to need help sometimes. You have to be bold and brave enough to ask for that help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I remember I Googled how to use my stove, you know, as the Brits would say, the hob. When I first moved into my first place, I did not know how to turn on the oven. And those are things that I find comical. And I laugh at myself with those things. And you're gonna have to have a certain level of humor, and you have to just laugh at yourself sometimes. And it is either you're going to do that or you're going to get frustrated really quickly.
Yes, for sure. For sure. And switching gears a little bit, can you tell us about some of the more logistical things? So some of the main questions that we get from people who are listening are, okay, I've made the decision. I'm going to do it. Now, how do I get a visa? How do I find a place to live? How do I earn money? What do I do about healthcare? Can you tell us a little bit about how you navigated those things?
Okay, so my first experience, because I would have had a job going in, I'd done a bunch of research, and you know, initially most companies will give you an initial accommodation, but that accommodation runs out way faster than you think it's going to happen. So they were very helpful in that they had put me onto a realtor. And I've had maybe one or two of my expat experiences where they had put me onto a realtor But I will say that in all my expat experiences, I ended up finding my own place.
Okay.
Because a lot of times the realtor don't always work at the speed that you want them to work at. They don't always understand what you would prefer. And just give you an example, like, the realtor in one of those situations said to me, most individuals who come would prefer to live closer to the town area because they can walk to work and then they don't have to necessarily purchase a car. And that was what most expats would have liked. I am the type of individual, because I spend a lot of time alone, I know I don't want to come out of my home and see my office. I want to feel like I am getting away from the office. So I say to them, well, I'm absolutely the opposite. Then they would say, oh, most persons would prefer not to have that expense of a car initially. And I'm like, no, I want to do that, because one of the ways that I entertain myself and I keep myself occupied is that I drive around the country a lot wherever I'm living, because I take photographs, and I find that keeps me, sane and everything in between. So initially off the bat, in all of my experiences, I knew, okay, I'm going to have to help myself. So and again, by that time I was already living on my own. I'd already had 3 different apartments between Barbados and where else alone. So I knew how to look for an apartment. You look for an apartment in whatever country, pretty much similar to the same way you will do it outside of your country. And that is websites. You find whatever groups, now social media is more active. So if it's a Facebook group or that type of thing, and you do this before you leave your country, you spend time in that country virtually. So what I start by doing, if I'm moving to a country and I know that, as soon as I know whether it's 3 months or 6 months out, I start to read the newspaper in that country. I go online every day and I read the newspaper in that country. Great. So therefore I know exactly what's happening in the country. I know there may be like some tele-classifieds in that country, and you can follow those, follow the blogs or whatever people are writing, follow comments. You get so much information by reading the comment section. People will lead you to how to look for an apartment. People will tell you. And even if it's a case where you find yourself, and I know I haven't done this, but I see a lot of people doing this, even persons who are moving to Barbados, like they will reach out months ahead and say, how do I do so and so? And people are always eager to help you and point you in that direction. So in every country that I've moved to, there have been this website that is set up primarily just to find local accommodation. It is very competitive. Like you have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to see when some of this stuff is posted. But you keep doing that, watch the teleclassifieds, call up, keep calling, tell your coworkers you're looking, whatever. And you keep going until you find a place that is suitable for you, or you find some place that you like. If it is a case where you have to leave your accommodation because it's running out of time and, sometimes it's more expensive, then unfortunately you may have to take something that's temporary or short term. And if you do that, don't sign the long-term lease. Don't sign the long-term lease until you are sure this is an environment that I like. This is what I envisioned for myself. And this is something that I can actually afford. So those are the basics in terms of looking for accommodation. It will be stressful in the beginning. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it and make you think that it's all honky-dory and it's easy. Because there are a lot of countries, especially countries that if you're moving to a country as an expat, it means that that country doesn't necessarily have the skills there. So it may be a place where there are a lot of people who are moving there. Even if you are moving not necessarily as an expat and you're moving as a digital nomad, you may be moving somewhere where a lot of digital nomads want to be moving now. So it's going to be competitive in terms of looking for accommodation. And from your research on, and, just maybe even following hashtags on social media, whether it's Instagram or whatever, you may come across, like, let's say, other digital nomads. Reach out to them, ask them how they did it. People are always willing to help you. So that was how I would say you cover accommodations. But I would also say, as somebody who spent a lot of time in hospitality, do not send money, do not commit to anything before your eyes have seen it. I've seen some horror stories where you get there and the accommodation doesn't exist. You get there and it's nowhere. And as I said, I was a hospitality accountant. I've spent quite a bit of years in hospitality. Every room will look better on the internet. It will always. That's our job.
Yes.
So in terms of visas, if you're going as an expat, again, your company will sort that out for you. So you just pretty much have to provide the information and wait until it's processed. Again, not as easy as I make it sound. Sometimes that information is a lot harder to get. You have to get, regardless of whether you're going as an expat digital, no matter however you're going. The basic things: make certain your passport is valid, make certain you have proper status on your passport, and that is, it's not going to expire within the next 6 months or even a year or whatever. Make certain, I always try to travel with photographs. Even though it's easy to get photographs in another country, I always make certain that I leave my country or wherever I'm leaving, especially when you're going traveling, you're going to be moving a lot. Just get basic photographs, a passport, and just carry them with you. You just never know when you're going to need them. Because if you have to pick up a visa on the road, let's say, because I travel on a Barbados passport, it only gets me so far. I'm constantly like in Asia, I'm constantly looking for another visa, and I have to have, passport photos each time I do that. So even before you leave your country, those are things that you're going to need. Make certain you have good documentation. You have good valid copies of your birth certificate, any other certificates that you may have, marriage certificates, whether you've changed your name, even things like your education. Make certain that you have those. Make certain they're certified in your country. Just not like just random photocopies, but make certain that you have them certified. If you are using a different foreign language, you're also going to have them to get them translated. And some of this stuff gets expensive if you have to translate them to. I've not had to translate any of my information to another language, but I know sometimes you can spend as much as $150 and up just to get some of this stuff translated. And I also travel with my doctor documents as well, because I do have, an underlying medical issue. It's not prominent, but it presents itself in chronic fatigue, and traveling makes you tired and stuff like that. So I always make certain that I have documents of my medical. And just to point this in here, regardless of who you are and where you're going, every time you leave a country, make certain you get all your medical documents from that country to take with you wherever you're going. I'm carting around a massive folder at this point. But that's something that I just want to say, because I want to also to say to people that there are persons out there that may feel like, oh, I can't ever do this because I have a medical condition. I can't ever do, and it may not be a chronic medical condition, or maybe not something that keeps you sick, but people just feel, oh, this is not something for me. And I just want to share that that is not the case. We can all do it, just maybe at your pace. What else do we cover? So in terms of looking for a job, I've not had the experience of relocating to a particular country and then looking for a job. I've only had the experience of having that job already before I relocated. But if I were to share some information, I would say approach it the same way that you'd approach looking for an apartment, or approach it the same way you would approach it looking for a job in that territory. Start to look before you leave. Look at what the requirements would be. Make certain you have all your documentation that you are bringing with you. Make certain that you can apply for a job in that country, that you understand what it takes to apply for a job in that country. Whether it is that you need to, because of your profession, if you have to apply, like say for a license or a particular certificate and go through a period of time, because I know sometimes what will happen is that an individual may understand, okay, as a teacher, I need to do X, Y. As an accountant, I need to do X, Y. As a tradesman, I need to do X, Y. They sometimes don't understand how long it takes. Sometimes it takes governing bodies 3 months, 6 months, and you have to figure out how you're going to support yourself. So these are things that you must, and it all comes down to doing as much research as you can. And if you can, speak to individuals who have done that. And YouTube is a wealth of experience. There are so many persons there who are documenting their process of moving to another country. Look for people with your similarities. And that is, look for people who are either in the field that you want to get into, or look for people who are in your age bracket, or look for people who have similar nationalities. You will find someone and you can kind of adapt that. In terms of, like earning money on the road, depending on your age bracket. So when I did my round the world trip, these are some advantages that I couldn't take on because I'm a Barbadian and my passport doesn't allow me to. But I know like British persons, Americans, Australians, they can apply for what you call a year visa, a work travel visa. I'm not sure if that's the right name, where like, a lot of British people, they go down to Australia for a year and they are allowed to seek employment and travel for that year. And these are things that you can apply for online and get, and get that confirmation or approval within a quick point of view. So it depends on the type of passport that you have. And again, you're going to have to do your research. There's a couple of websites where you can go in and you can put in the passport that or the nationality that you have, and it will tell you all the countries that you can travel to visa free and for how long, and it will tell you the ones that you need visas for. Mm-hmm. And that is also very important to make certain you don't get stuck around the world, again, bleeding money without knowing, hey, how is this? Because it's very frustrating. I mean, I've done all of that and I've still gotten stuck. And it's just one of those things. The biggest part that I would say in a relocation, and the finance person in me always will say, you have to be financially prepared. That will look different for a lot of persons. And it depends on your structure. It depends on the countries that you're going to. A lot of countries, you will not have the right to claim any level of benefits. You will not have the right for medical help. There are some countries that will give you emergency medical help, and there are some that will give you, but you're going to have to pay. And I mean, you do not want to get stuck in some country where they hand you a medical bill for $100,000. So you also need to make certain that you have insurance coverage before you embark, regardless of what you are attempting to do. And what I will say is get the insurance that will cover you for the time of what your purpose is. If you are traveling, get travel insurance. For persons who don't know, if you are doing a round the world trip, as I did, regular travel insurance does not cover that. You need round the world travel insurance. There are different types of insurance. You can get expat insurance as well. And even if it means then you end up settling somewhere where you are allowed to access basic health insurance or basic health care in that country, is going to be a process before you get there. Make certain you are covered. So back to the financial, that comes into the whole financial scheme of things as well. I build a budget. I'm a budget guru. This is what I do. So let's say, for example, whether I'm moving as an expat, whether I was going on my round the world trip, part of my research is that I would have already rated out how much money it costs to live in this particular country. There are many blogs out there. There's many data from all the governments as well, where you can see what accommodation costs, everything that costs, and I build out a budget. So let's say when I was moving from Antigua to Bermuda, Bermuda has they have the award as the most expensive city in the world, at least 10 years running. The first thing you learn about Bermuda is how expensive it is. So, what I wanted to first gauge is how much more expensive will my daily life be as opposed to what I'm currently spending. And sometimes that also gives you an insight if you're also trying to negotiate salaries. This is also very, very relevant for if you're going to negotiate salaries. But you want to be able to do these things. Like when I was going traveling, I would look at the individual countries, let's say Thailand, to see what does it cost to live in Thailand a day? And that is between accommodations, travel, and food. What is the basic things? Of course, you're going to do activities and you add those on. So I go to my budget. I have a line item for accommodation. You have a line item for food. You have, as if you're traveling, if you're an expat, at some point, you're going to settle down and you're going to cook and go to the supermarket. If you're traveling, you cook less and less. So you need to make certain that you're putting in the right requirements of what it costs to eat out a day. Or even when you're first settling into a country, the first week or 2 weeks, you may not be able to provide your own meals. So you want to make certain that your cost is equivalent is realistic. So you have your accommodations, you have travel. At that point, you should know if you're initially going to be traveling by train, by bus, or, a taxi here and there, whatever, you put in that cost in between there as well. Of course, there's a whole pre-cost before you move, which will be the cost of the visas, the cost of the air flights, just getting because regardless of where you're going, if you're going a long term, you have to get medical clearance from your country before you go. And there's a cost attached to all of that. Passports, whether you need to get it renewed and all of those. So you have your pre-cost before you've even left, your initial visas and those type of things. Then you have what I call that initial cost when you first land. And that is when things may be chaotic. You may not be doing the best you may not be doing the best budget-wise in terms of frugal living. You are just trying to survive. I need to get this. I need to eat. I need to sleep somewhere. I need to. So you have to have those costs. And then you will have costs as you start to settle down. You may be able then to move into a monthly accommodation, which will be a lot cheaper. And you may be able then to have, accommodation with facilities, a kitchenette or whatever that you can provide for your own meals and stuff like that. So you want to make certain that you have that budget down packed. Now, if it is a case where you're going to a job, then my first paycheck is in a month. You know how to rate yourself. If it's a case where you are now going somewhere to settle in and then look for a job, you have to estimate that's going to take you longer than you think is going to take you. Am I going to be able to survive or to be able to provide for myself? If you already have, let's say you were going to Australia or on the work travel visa, and you know that you already have that approval and it's only a matter of finding a job, and you're willing to take like what I say hourly work, and you're willing to do like bartender work and those type of pieces of work, which may be easier to get, then you can say, okay, well, 2 weeks or a month of me supporting myself is fine until I have some level of revenue coming in. If you're going to a country where you now have to sit and wait for them to approve that visa or work or permission to reside or permission to work or whatever while you're sat there, you may be looking at 3 months to 6 months. And you have to make certain that you have the funds to do it. So once you start to gauge out how much is going to cost, then what you will see is the time period in which I can make this happen. So between the time where you said, this is something I want to achieve, all of these things that you have to do and the work that it will take before you get on that plane and sit down, then you're going to say, okay, I can do this within a year. I'm working with a year. So let's say you want to say 2025 is my year, because you know that you need 2024 to process everything that you need to do. So when you open your eye on the 1st of January 2024, and I call this, sometimes I say operation, operation whatever. So you know that you're working on operation, I'm on whatever you name your thing. So this is what I need to do. This is how much I need to save. These are all the different boxes I need to tick. And pretty much that's how you go about it.
I love that.
It is, and I will add, it is a lot of work.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that because it is very clear that there are actual steps in the process that have to happen. It's not just kind of like, okay, let's wing it. But there are steps that you have to take in order to do that. One of the resources that I have on my website is a move abroad checklist where I break down these steps. Because every step, this is one of the things that I always tell like college students about adulting is I'm like, adulting is for the birds, because every step you take, if you want to do this one thing, there are 8 sub-steps that go into that one thing for the step. And that's why it's so important to have a plan, which is the part that I love about getting people abroad, is really helping you develop that plan and understanding the steps and understanding the process. Because I think, like you said, it's like once you make a decision, you have to have a plan from there, because these things can take 3 months. They can take 6 months. It can take a year. So how do you figure out exactly how to do that? And one thing I really want to make sure I touch on with you, because it's not very often we have someone who's traveled to 40 countries as a solo traveler. So I definitely want to make sure we talk to you. But can you share with us about, like, are there any recommendations you have on how to make sure you're traveling safely as a solo traveler? What are things that you maybe look out for when you're picking a country to go to?
If there's one thing that I can say, and you can forget everything else I say, do not do anything abroad that you wouldn't do at home.
Mm-hmm.
You can forget everything else.
Please don't forget
You know,
everything. There were gems. There were gems.
because people sometimes go abroad and they throw caution to the wind. Do
Mm.
not do that. Do not do that. So the number one thing, obviously, people traveling abroad, and there's this fear that people, depending on where you are from, there's this fear people have about traveling abroad. And of course, there's another fear about traveling solo. There's another fear about traveling as a woman. There's another fear of traveling as a Black person. There's a lot when you start to stack it.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely nothing that I've encountered so far that I would say has made me rethink traveling as a solo person. Look out for your safety. There are persons who will say travel in packs and whatever. I don't do any of that stuff. Number one, I make certain that I don't do things that I wouldn't do at home. I don't throw caution to the wind. Make certain that you don't have large sums of cash on you. My number one thing is that I never look like a tourist. There are times, because I'm in some place called Puerto Trangano. As a Black person, I cannot hide. There are people who are going to walk around the street behind me. They are going to take photographs of me. I cannot do anything about that. But at the end of the day, I always try to make certain that I don't look like a tourist. And there are easy ways to spot a tourist. It can be by the way they dress, but it also is by the way that they behave on the street. Always behave as if you know where you were going. I will be damned if anyone caught me on a street with a map. You will never find me on a street with a map. Not even in New York City will I do that. If I need to look at where I'm going, or I need to be on a train state and I need to figure out my trains or whatever, I study those things before I come outside. When I come outside, I already know if I need to turn left or if I need to turn right. And therefore, I'm always walking with purpose. So people don't, be like, okay, she doesn't know where she's going, whatever. There are times where I don't speak. And I don't speak because I would rather you try to guess if I'm a foreigner than speaking, immediately that I'm a foreigner. There are times where, and I know I've had this situation in South Africa, where I will rather you think that I am rude than speak and that I am not local. And I've had many persons who came up to me and were, and eventually realizing that I was not necessarily on the street, but we're in a closed environment. And then they realized that I am not from there. And they were like, wow, but I thought you were from there just by looking at you. But I would rather someone think that I'm rude before I speak and put myself in danger. The whole thing of valuables, you make certain. There are places I may go in Europe and I may walk around with my big, digital camera and take photographs. There are countries that I will go to and my camera will never come out of my bag. There are countries I will go to and my camera will never leave the hotel. You have to know your surroundings, understand your surroundings, be vigilant. Everything is not about catching that photograph. I travel to a lot of these countries, and while I have photographs of these countries, there are hardly any photographs of me because I am not there to prove that I've been there. And I'm not going to put myself at risk by pulling out a camera and then deeming myself to be a tourist because I need to prove or validate with photographs that I've been there. And that is just who I am. And I just don't only solo travel. I travel to offbeat places. So, I've hiked to go sleep with tribe people. And yes, there are a lot of photographs of that because that is more, it was a commercialized type scenario where they came and they picked you up. And, we had a guide. There were like 10 or 12 of us trekking through, Thailand, the north of Thailand, but we had a local guide doing it. So you just have to be, as I said, really vigilant. Try to not look like a tourist. Don't do anything that you wouldn't do outside of your country. Be very mindful of who you take help from. Not everybody's providing help for you for the right reasons. Be very mindful of that. And when I say mindful of that, I don't mean the local people. You have to watch your own tourists as well too.
Darn right you do.
Be vigilant. Be vigilant.
Yeah.
For me, I spend a lot of my time sightseeing. So I don't necessarily spend a lot of time on the party scene when I do travel, so, which is a whole other different story. So I tend to be the type of person, and because I want to take a lot of photographs, I'm that traveler that I can get up and be out of the door early because I also want to be all the other travelers. So if I'm going to some place that's very popular, I want to get there before people get there and start flooding the place.
Yeah.
Travelers and tourists don't usually get them very early. If I know that I want to go and see some place and photograph some place that's popular, I will get up early. I am outside the Eiffel Tower before the door opens. Because when that door opened, I'm one of the first people who's through that gate. And there are quite a few hundred people out there, maybe like 100 persons. But at the same time, it's not busy. Right. So those are things that I do. So pretty much when I go out and I spend a whole day outside seeing, I make certain that I get in before it's dark. On the other side, I like to, especially when I did my round the world trip, I wanted to see like what it is like to be, what the nightlife is like in these countries. And there and then that's where I would predominantly not necessarily go on my own. I have to be in a few places on my own. But that's where I would then sometimes go with other travelers. And the same things apply. Make certain you know who you're going with. You will meet travelers around the world who are going to go out. They're going to get drunk. Do you want to have to babysit them, or do you want to not know where you are and how to get yourself back home? So these are things then that you want to be thing. If that's a scenario where I'm on my own and I want to go and experience the nightlife, I will speak to the hotel or the guest house or wherever I'm staying, and I will let them provide transportation for me. I will rely on them because, at the end of the day, they don't want bad publicity for themselves if something happens to one of their guests. So I will let them arrange the transportation for me. It may be more expensive, but I will let them arrange transportation to take me. So for example, again, South Africa, I want to go to Camps Bay at night. You have to go see what it is like. So I take transportation from my accommodation, and I will say to them, come back for me at 10 o'clock, come back for me at 11 o'clock. So I make certain I'm using the same person that took me there. And these are things that you can do to keep yourself safe as a solo person. I also drove across South Africa for 2 weeks on my own. Again, I didn't have a map. So every night I would study where I want to go. One town to the next town. I would always drive from a main town to another town. If it was going to take me 4 hours, or even if days that it took me 8 hours, I know that I have to be on the road at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Because if I'm going to be driving 8 hours today and I need to stop for lunch and I want to stop and do some sightseeing, take some photographs, I need to get in the town that I'm getting to before it gets dark. And I just need to, and I need to do that. And that is what I do. So back to the thing. Don't throw caution to the wind because you're traveling. Be very vigilant and do the things that you should do to keep yourself safe. The basic things, mindful of food that you eat from people, watch your drinks. Those are basic things that you would do generally at home. Continue to do those things. And if you have any doubt about going to a particular place, don't go. And I've had situations like that even here in the Caribbean, where I've traveled to the Caribbean. There are places that are popular. I do a lot of off-season travel, and I may have gotten to the location. I remember there's this one Pacific place. I got to the location. This place is a very popular place, but it was off-season. And I got there and it was empty. There was hardly anyone around. I started to feel that feeling. I saw someone, they came up and they said, hey, you just need to whatever. And I wouldn't tell you, I left. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it.
That is really, really great. That's great advice. Thank you so much. And I know we're running short on time, so I just want to quickly ask, we still have some people who might be listening who are on the fence. What advice would you give them to help them make the decision if that's what they really want to do?
You have not fully lived a life unless you come out of your own circle. You will never grow to the individual that you know that you can be, the individual that you don't know that you can be, until you leave your circle.
Yes.
Nothing in life is permanent. You don't like it, you leave. I mean, it's simple, you know. If you don't like this particular country, you move on to another one. But even if you've had the experience where you've gone abroad and you've lived and you've done all of that and you said, oh, yeah, this is great, but you can always go home.
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the end of the day, life in itself, we at some point in time, we're all going to pass away. And I find sometimes again from the environment that you live in, the fear. And, you know, like this was something I wrote a specific chapter in my book on fear, because I know that fear is one of the biggest things that we can all deal with in challenges in life. And that fear isn't necessarily coming from you. That fear comes from your environment. That fear is passed on by your family, by your parents, from their parents, from your environment. And that fear will keep you bogged down.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to say, I am not fearful. There are so many persons who've done it before you. There are persons who have tried. There are, you know, and this is what I say, I'm still alive. I'm still alive. So therefore, you know, don't let that fear hold you back. Do not let that fear hold you back. It is, and you know, from a financial perspective, and this is, you know, where I like to instill in people, it is achievable for everyone. It doesn't matter what income bracket you are in, or it doesn't matter what status you were born in. This is something that's achievable. And now we're in an era where it's more achievable than it was before. And it's achievable for everyone. Some persons may have to work a little bit harder on their pre-game before they can do that. But at the end of the day, it's achievable.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. It was so great to talk to you. You have so many gems in there, so much practical information that I know is going to be so helpful. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So if you are willing and you're ready now that you've heard these wonderful insights to take the leap, I am here to support you on your personal journey. So head to my website, www.yourbestlifeabroad.com, for information on how to turn your dream of moving abroad into reality. So thank you again for joining us today. And just remember, there is no time like the present to live your best life abroad. Bye.